All right, we'll go ahead and get started. First thing, I'd like to introduce Frida, our interpreter, and she's going to make an announcement about our language services available this evening.
Thank you, Andy. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the session. My name is Frida, and I'll be your interpreter. Muy buenas noches a todos y bienvenidos a esta sesión. Mi nombre es Frida y seré su intérprete. I'll give this message both in English and in Spanish. Daré este mensaje tanto en inglés como en español. In order to provide language access, this meeting will have simultaneous bidirectional interpretation in English and Spanish. If you're bilingual, you don't have to click anything. But if you're not bilingual and you're using your laptop, please locate the icon shaped like a globe at the bottom of your screen, click on language interpretation, and then select English. If you're using your phone or an iPad, then locate the three-dot menu in one of the corners of your screen, click on language interpretation, and then select English. When you speak, do so at a moderate pace because the interpreter is going to be simultaneously interpreting everything you say. A efecto de proporcionar acceso lingüístico, esta reunión contará con interpretación simultánea bidireccional al inglés y al español. Si usted es bilingüe, no tiene que presionar nada, pero si usted no es bilingüe y está en su computadora, localice el icono en forma de globo que está en la parte inferior de su pantalla, haga clic en interpretación de idiomas y después seleccione español o Spanish. Si está usando su iPad o su teléfono, entonces localice el menú de 3 puntos en una de las esquinas de su pantalla, haga clic en interpretación de idiomas y después seleccione español o Spanish. Cuando hable, hágalo en español. El intérprete estará simultáneamente interpretando todo lo que usted diga. Antes de que me vaya, ¿alguien tiene alguna pregunta respecto a la interpretación? Before I go, does anyone have a question in regards to interpretation? If not, we may begin. Thank you.
Thank you, Frida. So now we have a lot to cover with you tonight. I do want to explain briefly some of the features we'll be using later in the session as well. But first of all, my name is Andy Pindoli. I'll be serving as meeting facilitator. And so you'll have the same features whether you're joining from your computer or cell phone. So we greatly appreciate your help in providing your comments through the chat tonight when you can. At any time, but we do have a lot of questions we have for you, and we're looking forward to hearing your questions and comments. And this is located at the bottom of your screen, or if you're joining by cell phone, you'll see the 3 dots at the lower right corner of your screen, and I'll show you that in a moment. We also have available, if you'd like to speak over audio, you can use the raise hand feature in Zoom, and or you can use *9 from your phone. We'll also be using Zoom polls on a few occasions to help just kind of collect some information and ideas from you. And additionally, we'll pause after our speakers have, we've heard from them tonight to be able to open up. We want to spend the bulk of our time hearing from you tonight overall. And again, these are the Zoom features as typically seen on if you're using a smartphone, perhaps sometimes even on an iPad or a tablet. So again, look for the 3 dots in the bottom right corner, and then you can normally find the chat and or the raise hand feature there. So, all right, with that, thank you again. I want to go ahead, we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to give you a brief overview of our format tonight. We have 3 presenters who will be presenting directly in a row, probably for upwards about 30 minutes or so, 30, maybe 35 minutes. We'd like to make sure they get through all of their material, because then we want to open up for the rest of our time here to hear from all of you. We have a number of questions we want to pose to you, and we appreciate you offering your thoughts back, and happy to hear your questions and answer them the best we can tonight with the team that we have here as well. So the first person I want to introduce to you is Murtaza Baksamusa with the County of San Diego. He'll give you a little bit more description of his background and talk more about why we're here tonight. So Murtaza, thank you.
Thanks, Andy. It's rewarding to see the number of people interested in this project. Many of you have participated throughout, and many of you are new, so welcome. I'm Murtaza Baksamusa, Program Manager for Regional Sustainability from the Land Use and Environment Group's Executive Office. The framework is one of many county initiatives that promote a more sustainable community. I'm really proud of this framework because it promotes everyone working together, public and private stakeholders, to help move the region towards zero carbon emissions in several key areas. Joining forces to reduce our carbon footprint is critical. We can't solve this climate crisis in silos. The steps in this journey rise from our current understanding of the state of the region to our future actions to meet our collective goals. Next slide. The goal of this framework is to help policymakers across the region, including our County Board of Supervisors, identify ways that governments can decarbonize while working in harmony with business, labor unions, environmental advocates, and the community. Our first step was the modeling platform. We began this step last July with a series of workshops before we began the analysis, as well as a public meeting in September that generated a lot of discussion. We then published a draft of the technical report last October that received over 500 comments, many with detailed analysis, especially from the technical working group. This is the second revision of the technical report, and the third and final revision will be completed after the comment period closes on May 31st. During this process, we have provided updates to our board 4 times. And for each of these board meetings, the documents and videos are posted on our county's website. This is the second step on the RDF journey. As we move to the next step, the policy recommendations generated by the framework will be shaped by community input based on science-based projections, as well as the workforce study that you will hear more about tonight that limits the impact of these changes on our workforce. In case you have not seen the framework, you can read it at engage.sandiegocounty.gov/RDF. We will be putting this link in the chat as well, and I would encourage you, if you cannot read the 530 pages, to at least read the document called Summary for Policymakers. The new virtual engagement platform allows you to directly provide feedback, have a discussion, post messages and questions, and see what others are commenting on as well. Today's event is a continuation of this outreach in a community forum to reach every resident in our region. Our goal is to inform, to educate, and to engage you further as we move towards the implementation step. And this journey will continue as implementation continues. Today, Elise Hansen, also from the Land Use and Environment Group Executive Office, will walk you through more specifics of the framework with the county presentation. And then we will have Dr. Gordon McCord from University of California, San Diego, School of Global Policies and Strategy, and Scott Anders from the University of San Diego Energy Policy Initiative Center, available to answer your questions along with me. Now, I'm really excited to introduce our first presenter, Elena Crete, who is the author of the chapter, San Diego Region as a Model in Our Framework. Elena Crete is a climate and energy program manager for the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, where she focuses on special initiatives for Deep Decarbonization Pathways Project and other climate and energy projects. Elena serves as the lead for the annual Low Emissions Solutions Conference, launched at the 22nd Conference of Parties, or COP22. Part of Elena's core portfolio is to help bring low emission solutions to decision makers across networks and sectors throughout the globe to implement the Paris Agreement. With that, I will turn it over to Elena.
Thank you, Murtaza, for that wonderful introduction, and it's so wonderful to be here with you all today. So hi, my name is Elena Crete. As Murtaza just mentioned, I work for the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network, or SDSN for short. So we are a global network of academic and research institutions that are specifically working on implementing the SDGs. So this map here shows basically our global network. So we have more than 44 national and regional networks that are made up of more than 1,600 member institutions across 137 countries around the world. And this also includes our SDSN USA network, which has members across all 50 states, and it's what brings me here today. So I run the Climate and Energy Program, and basically since 2015, we've been really focused around developing and designing decarbonization pathways to facilitate the global energy transition and to reduce greenhouse gases. So I was also the managing editor of America's Zero Carbon Action Plan, or ZCAP, which you can see on the screen here, which was published in 2020. And it was a precedent of our RDF project that we're going to be discussing today. And in the ZCAP, we identified technology, employment, and policy solutions specifically targeted at the US federal government to help enable the US transition to decarbonization. And I'm happy to report that since the publication of that work, actually the modeling work that underpins our report has actually been cited in the US long-term strategy report, which was published by the Office of the United States President last November. So I'm here today as I've been participating in the San Diego Regional Decarbonization Framework Project, or RDF, since its conception. And I have a really exciting role in that I get to learn, extract, and share both the results and the process of this exercise with the world throughout our global network. And so to kick off today, I'd like to set the stage and showcase just how important, novel, and impactful this exercise has already been and will continue to be as a case study for the world and for both nations, cities, and local governments around the world to work toward their commitments in the Paris Agreement. As some of you may already know, the Paris Agreement, which is also often referred to as the Paris Accord, is an international treaty on climate change adopted in 2015. It covers climate change mitigation, adaptation, and finance. And so on this screenshot here, which I took earlier this week from the Climate Watch Net Zero Tracker. So this is a tool that was created in partnership with Google, the World Bank, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the World Resources Institute, and other large-scale private sector and NGO partners. And as this is showing here, we currently have 83 countries, which represent about 75% of global greenhouse gas emissions, who have committed net zero pledges. These communications include either doctrines of law, policy documents, or political pledges. And in the case of the United States, we fall in the net zero policy document, which is that US long-term strategy I mentioned before. So in addition to these national commitments, also this Race to Zero campaign, another UN initiative, now boasts that there is a global coalition of net zero commitments representing more than 1,000 cities, more than 60 regions, 5,000 businesses, more than 400 investors, and over 1,000 higher education institutions, and this consortium is growing. So with these actors working to define what exactly net zero means as industries, different scales, different markets, and different geographies work to realize net zero and really define it, one thing remains quite clear, is that we need real concrete action from the biggest emitters if we're ever going to globally achieve net zero emissions. So given that greenhouse gas emissions and CO2 emissions don't stay within the borders of the countries that emit them, it's the responsibility of the biggest emitters to really take the biggest steps to cutting those emissions. And so this chart is showing the share of global cumulative CO2 emissions since basically the Industrial Revolution in 1750. The colors here are slightly misleading in that the US's historical share is really around 25% of global cumulative emissions. China is about 13%, half of that, and Russia, which is the next one, is about 7% as of 2020. So really, the world is looking to the United States to prove decarbonization is technically, economically, and politically possible. We need to demonstrate projects to prove not just the feasibility, but ultimately all the mutual benefits of decarbonization, such as better air quality, stronger storm resilience, strengthened and diversified economies, energy stability and security, and overall improved public health. So the most exciting part of this story is that we have all of the ingredients we need. all of which have served as precursors for our RDF project. So I'm going to just quickly mention 4 before I pass to my colleague to go into the RDF results. So going back to that Paris Agreement I mentioned, we now have this time-bound global commitment to decarbonization, which is signed by 193 parties. This provides a global mechanism through which countries can commit, report, monitor, and align ambition. It also sends a strong signal to businesses and investors who now understand that the future really does include a net zero emission reality and climate resilience. The next issue worth noting is a resounding growth in national and local political will. The United States rejoined the Paris Agreement last year, and both our federal and state governments are starting to design policy packages that support this net zero transition, and obviously our local governments as well. California is one of the United States' most progressive governments, striving to achieve carbon neutrality by 2045. And honestly, the RDF is going to be a huge important component of that to help the state achieve that goal. And also, as most of you are probably aware, the cost of renewable technologies and components has come down as demand, markets, and supply chains have expanded. So these market signals are nicely demonstrated here by this chart by the National Renewable Energy Lab, which is showing the 10-year decline in solar prices for a variety of scales of solar arrays, from rooftop systems to utility scale. And then finally, I'd just like to mention especially the advance in science. So tools like our GIS remote sensing and integrated assessment models, which align features of society and our economy with the biosphere and atmosphere into one modeling framework, we can now design informed decision-making processes and understand the implications and trade-offs of our energy transition decisions, so we can assess how they will impact our people, planet, and our ways of life. So we have what we need. It's now time to implement. And as demonstrated by these 4 examples, this progress has been underway for many years. As such, several regional projects, much like the RDF, have progressed with this regional decarbonization approach. I'm just going to mention quickly 3 examples. I'm just going to give you a little bit of a flavor of what's included in them. These are pulled directly from Chapter 7 of the report, so I strongly encourage you all to go visit that chapter to learn more. So first off, in Central Florida, really interestingly, a newly created Council of Governments is working to tackle sustainability and resilience through regional decarbonization. This initiative convenes 37 partners, including counties, cities, towns, and public agencies, with the goal of reducing their carbon footprint, risks, vulnerabilities, and increasing sustainability efforts at a regional scale. In Washington, D.C., there's the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments, COG, is another one of the nation's leading groups in addressing climate change at a regional level. The COG is an association of 300 elected officials from local and state governments, as well as members from the US Congress, that collaborates to address major regional issues of climate and energy action in the District of Columbia, Maryland, and Northern Virginia. And then lastly here, I'll just mention Kansas City, which actually has a long history of implementing sustainability initiatives to ensure economic, social, and environmental benefits, and has recently employed a collaborative regional approach in its 2021 climate action planning. Their recent CAP now serves 10 counties and 123 municipalities in both the states of Kansas and Missouri, and is made up of a team of over 130 local and state elected leaders, community members, and stakeholders, spearheaded by Climate Action KC and Mid-America Regional Council. These are just a few quick examples. There are many others across the country, including from Pittsburgh, Massachusetts, Denver, and beyond. You can see other examples in the report. I'd also like to highlight that most of these initiatives are not only working to address the climate and energy challenges of of a sustainable future, but also taking of a holistic approach that Murtaza mentioned earlier to address just and equitable transition, addressing our environmental and pollution issues, committing to local leadership, both locally, nationally, and globally, and advancing and sharing the latest research, development, demonstration, and deployment of innovative solutions. So with that, I'm going to close. I've hopefully given you some optimistic framework in which we are digging into the details of our results today. I'd just like to reiterate how excited I am to participate in this project and to share this unique decarbonization demonstration project with the world. I look forward to all of your comments on the draft report that's online and continuing to be part of this group. Thank you, everyone.
All right, thank you so much, Elena. With that, we're going to now transition to start to look more closely now at the status of developing the regional decarbonization framework here at home in our region. So it's a nice segue over to Elise Hansen with the Land Use and Environment Group of the county. She'll give you a little bit more description of her role and background on this project, and then get straight into the latest developments on our project. We'll give her probably about 15 minutes or so. And then we're going to open it up, and we're looking forward to hearing from all of you here tonight. We have a number of questions for you, and we're looking forward to hearing your questions, thoughts, and comments. So with that, Elise, take it away, please.
Great. Thank you, Andy. Good evening. I'm Elise Hansen, and I am a management fellow in the Land Use and Environment Group, or LUJA's executive office. I was a chapter co-author for the technical report and was able to utilize my background in ecology and environmental policy as part of this larger project. And I'm excited to be in this role with the county team to continue working on regional decarbonization. Recognizing the need for a regional approach to addressing climate change, in January last year, the Board of Supervisors voted to create a regional decarbonization framework. This framework is intended to provide science-based pathways to inform policymaking in regional, county, and city governments towards reducing greenhouse gas emissions in the San Diego region. It is separate from, but complements, ongoing climate action planning efforts by local governments. The framework is a visionary document being developed collaboratively through public-private partnerships and community input. It will provide strategies and initiatives to move towards zero carbon emissions in the region. So let's start with the basics. What is decarbonization? Simply put, decarbonization is about reducing the total heat-trapping gases that are emitted into the atmosphere. We have all seen and felt the impacts of the planet overheating in terms of prolonged and more frequent extreme heat events, wildfires, droughts, and flooding. The goal of decarbonization is ultimately to achieve a balance in the carbon cycle in nature. That is our measure of success. It is also important to note that decarbonization can have additional health, environmental, and economic benefits, or co-benefits, such as improved air and water quality and high-quality green jobs. We'll be exploring these co-benefits as well in this process. We want to begin with the 3 guiding principles that drove this project from the start. The first principle was to use a data-driven approach so that we can all objectively gauge where we are and where we want to be. Our second principle is that our vision would be guided by input from the public, including business groups, labor groups, environmental advocates, Native American tribes, and communities across the region. We are going to be using a broad range of both traditional as well as virtual tools for community engagement. Finally, our third principle is that we are all in this together. We want to identify the additional role that the county can play in both supporting and convening public agencies, city and regional authorities, and tribal governments, and in collaborating to attract state and federal resources for climate mitigation, adaptation, and resilience. There are communities in the San Diego region that face unjust conditions and circumstances related to the environments in which they live. The tribal nations of the San Diego region are an example of one community that has historically faced such impacts. We would like to recognize those injustices with a land acknowledgement from our team. We acknowledge the harmony that existed between the land, nature, and its original people who have since endured displacement, persecution, and systemic oppression. We pay our respects to the unceded territory and homelands of the 17 tribal nations in our region the most of any county in the United States, from 4 cultural groups: the Kumeyaay, Diegueño, the Luiseño, the Cupeño, and the Cahuilla. As climate change increasingly threatens the region, its people, and its cultural identities, we aspire to learn from Indigenous traditional knowledge in undoing the injustices of the past. Based on the 3 principles of data, outreach, and collaboration, we derived 3 components of what we call an integrated regional decarbonization framework. Here are the 3 components. First, the technical report prepared by UC San Diego and some of the nation's leading experts on energy modeling. Second, a workforce development study by Inclusive Economics to ensure that our local workers benefit from climate investments. And third, implementation pathways. While there will be many studies, discussions, and recommendations throughout this process, actual decarbonization results will come from implementation of policies, programs, and projects by all of us working together. Here's our timeline. We began the modeling work last summer and released an initial draft of the technical report in the fall, after which we went to the board, took public comments, and had a technical working group provide an extensive review. The report authors then revised the drafts in response to the comments. Since then, we have received a revised draft of the technical report and a draft of the workforce report. With these, we now have an understanding of where we are as a region, and we are beginning the process of implementation design. From now through August, we will continue to work on the workforce development study and the implementation pathways. In August, we intend to present the integrated regional decarbonization framework with all 3 of the components I described earlier to the board for approval. The final fully integrated framework is intended to help policymakers identify opportunities for collaboration across sectors and jurisdictional boundaries. Prior to going to the board in August, we will be holding public outreach events like this one. Our public outreach will be organized into 6 categories to engage every community, public, and private stakeholder, to meet them where they are, to use their time wisely, and to provide them an experience that is tailored to their needs. These include community meetings like this one. These will be large public meetings occurring monthly with the intent to engage and educate the general public. Sector workshops. These workshops are intended to provide stakeholders who want a more detailed dialogue with subject matter experts. 4 of the workshops will be in April, 1 per week, each focusing on a key sector of energy, transportation, buildings, and land and agriculture. And then another one will be in May, focusing on jobs. Speaker series. This is intended to engage different types of audiences across the region. Guest speakers, selected based on their national reputation, would be encouraged to spark new ideas and explain old concepts in a different way so that we could all learn together. Direct engagement meetings and presentations. We are having regular meetings with cities and agencies, along with individual presentations to elected bodies, tribal governments, as well as interested stakeholder groups. Pop-up community events. These will include various opportunities to educate a general audience on the integrated framework, decarbonization, and the county's role in both. Regional convenings for implementation. These will be events with public officials and stakeholders with a goal of informing the audience of the implementation pathways. These will occur in the summer and fall. We are excited to share that Luge is piloting a new engagement tool. With this new platform, the public can learn about the project, ask questions, and review and comment directly on the draft integrated framework. This platform will guide the comment process through May 31st. The technical report was authored by a team led by the University of California, San Diego's School of Global Policy and Strategy, working in collaboration with the Energy Policy Initiative Center, or EPIC, at the University of San Diego's School of Law, and other consultants with technical expertise in different sectors. The framework's technical report provides quantitative pathways to decarbonization that model the entire region as a system under 4 decarbonization pathways. The technical report's analyses are based on proven technologies and on emerging best practices from across the nation and the world in the areas of buildings, transportation, electricity, and land use. These are our baseline assessments for our regional emissions. Some of the key takeaways from each of these sectors in the technical report are as follows. First, the geospatial analysis of energy siting shows that the region has sufficient available land area for utility-scale wind and solar generation to approach a fully decarbonized energy system, but that there will be trade-offs associated with large-scale regional energy generation. Second, the transportation analysis shows that projected annual emissions through mid-century under current transportation emission reduction strategies are inconsistent with the levels of reductions required under the governor's executive orders, and that there are opportunities to further reduce these emissions. Third, the buildings analysis focuses on building electrification and shows that replacing end-of-life fossil fuel heating systems with electrified systems is a near-term priority because some heating systems will only turn over once through 2050. And fourth, the land use and natural climate solutions analysis shows that the San Diego region can effectively and inexpensively sequester and store carbon dioxide through protecting natural and working lands and avoiding land use change. Now let's take a look at the local policy analysis by EPIC, which was part of the technical report. This is the most comprehensive overview of climate action plans in the region. It is the first study of its kind that quantifies the magnitude of the challenge in achieving meaningful reductions in regional greenhouse gas emissions. It is not intended to evaluate, score, or rank any particular cap. It is important to emphasize that the analysis assumes that each jurisdiction acts within their authority to accomplish their commitments. This framework shows that even if all municipalities in the region did what they said they were going to do, we would fall far short of our goals in reducing planet heating gases in the 4 major sectors of San Diego's regional economy. Based on EPIC's work, there are 4 high-level key takeaways. First, the current total regional cap commitments do not put us on the pathway to reach our climate goals by mid-century. This is not a statement about any individual cap, but is rather a regional view of all caps combined. EPIC assumed that all caps demonstrate that they can reach their individual targets and that they implement all the commitments included in their caps. Second, local jurisdictions have the legal authority to do more than they are currently doing. So authority to act is not a barrier in many cases. Third, the good news is that there are numerous opportunities for local jurisdictions to do more to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and there are many examples of policies from our region and around California. Finally, EPIC identified numerous opportunities where regional collaboration can help to facilitate local action. Some examples of this are regional data collection and analysis on social equity, geospatial analysis to identify the best locations to plant trees, regional support for policy development, and financial incentive programs. The technical report does not comment on the structure of regional collaboration or which stakeholders would participate. Rather, the report highlights the areas where the whole may be greater than the sum of its parts. We released the draft of the workforce development study this month. It is titled Putting San Diego County on the High Road, Climate Workforce Recommendations for 2030 and 2050. It is authored by Dr. Carol Zabin from UC Berkeley and Inclusive Economics, and it is modeled after a statewide study that Dr. Zabin led. So what are high road jobs? High road jobs are those with job quality characteristics of family supporting wages and benefits, high standards for health and safety, long-term career pathways, and worker protections, including the right to organize. Additionally, high road jobs have job access characteristics of access and entry points to good jobs for local workers, as well as training to support advancement. Here's an excerpt from the study. Our approach here begins with the premise that San Diego climate policy can and should generate safe, family-sustaining career track jobs, broaden professional and economic opportunities for workers from underrepresented communities, and support workers and communities whose livelihoods depend on carbon-intensive industries at risk of decline as decarbonization proceeds. The most encouraging takeaway from this study is that we can do it as a region. There already exist feasible, field-tested workforce and economic development mechanisms that are complementary to climate policy and that can be utilized to improve outcomes for workers. Successful examples of strategies and investments to improve job quality and job access shows that it is possible to design climate policy that leads to good outcomes for workers. On a closing note, regional collaboration is essential for the development of implementation pathways. Therefore, the county will convene local and regional jurisdictions, agencies, and stakeholders to build coalitions that work together to solve problems that none of us can solve on our own. For example, in transportation, a regional authority can support EV infrastructure and look at the EV charging needs region-wide. In buildings, a regional program can provide technical assistance and policy development support for development and implementation of policies to decarbonize buildings. In electricity, existing regional community choice aggregation, or CCA, partnerships can be expanded. In land use and natural climate solutions, a regional analysis can identify suitable tree planting locations in high priority areas that lead to the best public and environmental benefits. And common to all of these is social equity, which can benefit from regional guidance on an equity element in climate action plans, regional equity indicators, and a regional climate equity report. We now know what more needs to be done collectively, and because we collaborate well in this region, our greener future is bright. That concludes our presentation, and we're happy to take your questions.
All right, thank you very much, Elise, for that presentation. Greatly appreciate it. It was a lot of information to go over. Thank you all for your patience and letting her get through those slides. And of course, Elena Hansen's preceding presentation, also rich with a lot of great information. So we really want to spend the rest of our time now hearing from all of you. Thank you for making the time to be here. We want to make the most of our time with you. So again, just a quick reminder about our format. We're happy to hear from you very much so through the chat. I want to acknowledge a lot of comments already coming in through the chat, which is really helpful for us. But you're also welcome to use the Zoom raise hand feature if you'd like to speak over audio. We'd be happy to take you in turn, and we'll be able to unmute you to be able to do that. And then I also want to remind you, for those of you who might be on a smartphone or tablet with slightly different Zoom controls, again, hopefully the 3-dot more button can reveal the chat and raise hand functions for you. So very good. So with that, we want to get started and again, open up. I want to hear from all of you. And I see a couple of hands already. I'm looking forward to calling on you in a moment. But let's start with actually a question for all of you that I wanted to pose just to start the conversation and to start to hear from you on some of these topics. And in a moment, we'll put up a Zoom poll tool. But I want to quickly first review this initial question with you just to kind of get you oriented to it. And this is related to the technical report on the decarbonization pathways that provide some key takeaways. And we wanted to just start with to ask you, which takeaway do you believe could be most easily implemented in our region? So we're asking, maybe you can just choose one to start. So first, either locating utility scale wind and solar for regional energy generation, improving on emission reduction strategies to match the governor's executive orders, replacing end-of-life fossil fuel heating systems with electrified systems, or sequestering and storing carbon dioxide through protecting natural and working lands and avoiding land use change. So these are all pathways that are emerging for decarbonization, but we want to just kind of take your pulse to see which you think might be most easily implemented in our region. So with that, we're going to open up the poll, and you should see it come on screen here. And you should be able to click, if you see pointing your mouse, or if you have touch screen, to choose the one that you think could be most easily implemented in our region. And again, I do want to stress we're not asking to pick one and remove the others. We just want to kind of get a sense from you what you think may be most easily implemented. So good, the votes are coming in. This is good. We'll keep going here. About half of you have weighed in. We'll give it maybe about 20 more seconds. All right, keep it coming. And we'll do a reveal here in about 10 more seconds. So, all All right, looks like most of you have weighed in. We'll go ahead and share the results with you here quickly. We'll go ahead and do that. Okay, there you go. So, you know, looks like interesting. Locating utility scale wind and solar energy, but a close tie or second just among this group with sequestering and storing carbon dioxide, but also replacing end-of-life fossil fuel, but you know, certainly some of you indicating the improving in emission reduction strategies. We'd love to hear more from you in the chat, or any of you who'd like to speak over the audio about, you know, why you chose what you did. Why do you think your choice may be most easily implemented? Maybe some more context and insight you can share with us about that. And I'm going to come to a couple of people who've raised their hand in a moment. And I also want to acknowledge a few people have provided comments during the presentations. Some comments about the importance of focusing on plastics, polyethylene as well as part of decarbonization, being really cautious and focused on time certain planning as well. I've seen comments about here. Again, continuing to not lose sight of the concerns around widening, expanding our freeway infrastructure that increase emissions, and you know, thinking about those investments and how that can impact regional decarbonization. But also a number of you have mentioned as well that, you know, a stronger emphasis as well on human survival, public health, environmental justice as well. So thank you all very much for those initial comments, and keep them coming in the chat. Again, we'd love to hear from you about why you chose what you did on this poll. But I am going to come now to the audio, and I see we're going to come to Carl first. Carl, we're going to let you unmute and let us know what are some of your comments, either on this first question we posed or anything else you wanted to offer at this point.
Hi, thank you. I wanted to thank you for the workforce impact report. And at the Board of Supervisors meeting, Dr. Zabin was asked about rooftop solar and why it wasn't competitive on how it pays workers compared to utility solar. And I just think that, although I appreciate that was tough for her to answer in a pinch, we should really be trying to morph that. And we should be fighting to get fair wages for rooftop solar workers, unionize them, and then continue to build on our rooftops. We have so many rooftops that have not been adopting solar yet. And this is a much wiser strategy to do infill solar and also allow those homeowners to enjoy the investment of the solar that they have. So this is a win-win if we can get our labor to work on solar in our infill and avoid putting in the open spaces. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Carl, appreciate that. And as a little brief reflection on your comment, I want you to know, we do have a question coming up about the jobs perspective workforce development. So stay tuned for that, as I heard you mentioning as well. And thank you for the details about different incentives and approaches to the rooftop solar. So thank you. Ms. Sonia Robinson, please go ahead. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you. I'm greetings to, let me see, can you guys hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, hi. Thank you all for the county staff for hosting this. I'm Sonia Robinson, Program Manager and lead organizer for the nonprofit, the Protect Our Communities Foundation. So we're really glad that the county is moving forward with clean renewable energy such as solar. And I have to echo what Carl said on our need for local clean energy. The draft report appears to have a bias toward the remote utility scale solar and not really including the transmission and distribution costs that this remote solar will cost when it's 100 miles away. In addition to that, I'd like to just bring to your point that the report actually correctly indicates that a focus on remote utility scale projects will likely require upgrades to the transmission system, and that's on page 27. And those upgrades are costly, and it costs us, the ratepayers. In addition to that, I would also like to bring to the point on this report that the assumed rooftop solar production cost of $92 is far too high and is outdated. And would like to ask that our county on this regional decarbonization framework include the National Renewable Energy Laboratory estimates, which is $46 megawatt per hour, which is like half of what the report is showing. In addition to that, I would like our Protect Our Communities Foundation, we would also like our supervisors and county staff to apply a principle of equitable analysis that includes the cost of the projected transmission projects that you guys have identified on page 63, as well as show what are the avoided costs of the same transmission and distribution costs when it comes to rooftop solar and to ratepayers. So I think right now I'm going to end it on that, but I think it's really important that we include what those costs are for transmission, because they're half of our bill is the transmission and distribution charges, and that's not included, as well as the avoided cost of that is when we do local. And we want, I think I'll end on this, that although we ask that you factor in this analysis to avoid the cost of the transmission and distribution and analyzing the benefits of local rooftop solar. But lastly, I want to say that for us, I was a community advocate for our CCA, which is San Diego Community Power. And my concern and hope also is that San Diego Community Power does not reflect SDG&E Part 2 with the high transmission and distribution rates that we, the ratepayers, will have to pay. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. There's a lot there. We appreciate that. And I do want to note briefly for everybody's benefit. So in addition, as I think you've all seen, we're recording on Zoom tonight. Appreciate everyone putting comments in the chat. So we have it recorded there, but some of our colleagues behind the scenes are also taking additional notes as well. So we have a lot of ways you're recording tonight. So getting a wealth of great ideas and input from all of you. So we thank you for that. So thank you, Sonia, for your input as well. And I want to acknowledge too, everybody, hopefully you're tracking the chat. A lot of great feedback. I really appreciate you all using the chat to provide us input. As you know, this is part of the benefit of using Zoom, right? We get a lot of people to write input at once, so we can all collectively see and hear that. So thank you all very much for that. Let's go on to Sean Keone-Ellis. Forgive me, Sean Keone, if I'm mispronouncing that. You should be able to unmute yourself. And what were your thoughts you wanted to share?
Awesome. Thank you very much, sir. My name is Sean Keone-Ellis. I represent the United Association of Plumbers and Pipe Fitters. For anybody on this great call right now that doesn't know who we represent, we're the builders of the natural gas plants and a lot of these fossil fuel jobs that will be going away in a matter of a few decades. But, I like to stand here today and be very thankful on the hard work the staff has done. From Carol Zabin to Dr. B and everybody involved, such a great job bringing somewhat of an all of the above approach and really being able to have open ears in regards to other items like hydrogen and a circular economy, finding solutions from waste to being able to maintain great pensions that us fossil fuel workers make today. So, I like to thank you guys. I know we have a lot of work, and the United Association here in San Diego and statewide is looking forward to working with our environmental brothers and sisters and everybody that holds elected office to really come up with a solution to this very hard problem of our climate crisis, because we all live here, right? So once again, I'd just like to thank everybody, and we're looking forward to working with all parties, all stakeholders, and really coming up with a solution. So once again, thank you for everybody's time, and you guys have a beautiful evening.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that. And indeed, just wanted to acknowledge, as you noted, there is not a one solution to address. This is a multi-layered, complex, integrated approach that we can all see is emerging here. So, and we thank you all for continuing to be involved and being very focused on the detailed technical, for instance, what Sonia was just mentioning, some reflection on methodology as well. So thank you for that. We continue to welcome that. I do want to also come to a couple questions that I've seen in the chat here. And I wanted to, Mr. Jim Pugh asked a specific question about what portion of our GHG impact is from methane versus CO2 or carbon dioxide. And so I'm going to come to Murtaza to maybe, if he's not able to give an initial response, maybe introduce another team member who might be able to do that for us.
Yeah, sure. Methane is a bigger portion of waste and wastewater. It's a smaller portion of other sectors. And overall, our industry, agriculture is a very small sector. So it is somewhat relevant for land use, but carbon dioxide is a much larger share for San Diego. So I'll ask if Scott can give us a little bit of kind of quantified opinion on that.
Scott Andrews, are you Go ahead, Scott.
Yes, I can address that. Thank you.
If you can introduce yourself briefly, Scott. Thank you.
Oh, sure. I'm Scott Anders, Director of the Energy Policy Initiative Center, and I led the work on the Local Policy Opportunities section, Chapter 8 of the technical report. So Murtaza is correct that the emissions from methane, and just to clarify, when we talk about emissions from methane, we're talking about direct emissions, not methane that's combusted. That would be then converted to carbon dioxide emissions, among others. This is direct methane emissions. Generally in our region, that's going to be from landfills and wastewater treatment plants. Wastewater treatment plants capture much of the methane that they generate. And that's the same, it's very similar for landfills. And I think that, I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but for waste, I think it's just a few percentage points. I want to say, 3 or 4% of regional emissions come from solid waste. So, but let me just kind of maybe emphasize Jim's comment, because while we don't have a lot of methane emissions are short-lived climate pollutants that have a pretty outsized impact on the atmosphere. And so any activity we can do to reduce them or remove them has kind of a quicker impact in terms of the impact in the atmosphere. And so it's definitely worth looking at this. And maybe final point here is we didn't look at methane in this project. We looked mainly at emissions from the energy sector.
Okay, thank you very much. And I did want to acknowledge there's a couple other questions here, and I know one in particular regarding from Ryan Maxon in the chat, asking about residential properties being part of the building retrofit. And Murtaza might be able to answer that here in brief. But Ryan, let me also just acknowledge your comments that you offered after that, the concern about the costs and the impacts. But yes, the answer is yes. Residential buildings are included on that. And Ryan, thank you for your thoughts about concerns around the impacts for costs related to, moderate income families, low income families, anyone on a fixed budget. Absolutely. So with that, I want to continue to ask you all to bring your questions forward. We're going to go ahead and introduce another polling question. And you'll see here, this is kind of the flip side of the question we just asked, and it's related to which takeaway do you think could be most challenging to implement in our region? And it's the same kind of answer options, if you will. Again, locating the utility scale wind, improving on emission reduction, replacing end-of-life fossil fuel with electrical, and sequestering, storing carbon dioxide. So my team members are going to offer up the second polling question here on screen right now. And there it is. So go ahead and kind of weigh in here, and we'll see. It'll be interesting to see your collective response and thoughts about which of those may be most challenging to implement. All right, great. Keep them coming. Thank you all for participating in this. All right, coming in, just under half of you. So if you haven't already, go ahead and weigh in. Take about 20 more seconds, and then we'll take a look at the results here. All right, about 5 more seconds, last call, and then we'll take a look, see what kind of collectively you had to say. All right, almost 2/3 of you weighed in. So let's go ahead and just share the results with everybody here. Let's take a look. Here we go. Good. So seem to go with the other question pretty well, a little more evenly distributed, but some of you did highlight the emission reduction strategies and replacing the fuel heating with electrified systems. So would appreciate hearing again from any and all of you about the choice you identify for being most challenging to implement on any and all of these. So again, in the chat is fantastic, but we're also happy to hear from anyone over audio. Again, wanted to, as we're waiting for anybody else who want to speak over audio, one mention, Corey Downs, for example, mentions that the end-of-life fossil fuel systems gives us the opportunity to reduce emissions while providing the same services, but many homes need help to add the required new wiring. Yeah, so it's certainly not easy to just swap out one component with another. There's some bigger infrastructure questions in an individual home, right? At a residential level, for example. So thank you for that comment and that feedback. So a lot of questions and comments here again. I think building on what Sonia mentioned a little while ago about transmission costs, what that infrastructure will cost, and in the long term, what those continuing cost fluctuations may look like as well. Comments on concern about property value loss, livestock, unsellable produce and meat from Diane. Thank you for sharing that. I know you had comments earlier about polyethylene impacts. Carl, thanks for the comments on emissions, for example. You know, looking at the EVs still aren't necessarily the answer, but there's a lot of complexities here overall. Landfills not capturing their methane overall. So thank you. A lot of really great rich comments coming in here. So good. So let's see. Let's go ahead and move on to another quick polling question here, and I'm going to preview it here for you before we put it up. So we want to talk a little bit more about regional collaboration, and as you know, this is a critical part, as has been stated at the highest level, that none of this can be achieved by one entity alone, one government agency, one private business, one nonprofit. So our question to you is, when we talk about regional collaboration, which of these examples do you think is most important? And I think we've designed this question. You could pick more than one here in this poll. But again, these are some specific examples. The regional authority around EV infrastructure, for example, regional programming to support policies to decarbonize buildings, expanded community choice aggregation. So you mentioned San Diego Community Power as an example of a CCA. So expanding those partnerships for electricity distribution, a regional analysis for suitable and high value locations for tree planting across our region, and expanded equity elements and indicators in local policies. We have heard comments from many of you here tonight about that. You know, again, making sure that is elevated in our thinking about decision-making and impacts in communities, and then other. So in the Zoom chat, we want to hear more from you about where you see regional collaboration happening that will be critical and necessary. So with that, let's go ahead and open up the Zoom poll and let's see how you all kind of react to these options here. And again, go ahead, you can go straight into the Zoom chat if you want to offer another option that you don't see in these set of these poll answer options as they are. All right. Very good. Keep it coming. Just over half of you have weighed in. All right. Let me give it a 10-second warning here. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the results. All right, here we go. So certainly, again, kind of across the board, you know, a lot of some of you supporting many of these, of course. Again, just perhaps another indicator that there is not one solution overall. So, yeah, thank you for that. And again, hopefully those of you who indicated other or went straight to the chat are telling us some more examples. So I want to go ahead and I see Kelly Linden's Zoom blue hand is up. Kelly, we'll go ahead and come to you. You should be able to unmute yourself. And yeah, would love to hear what your thoughts here on specific to the questions we've been posing or other feedback you have.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about whether there was any analysis done regarding hard to decarbonize industries in the San Diego region. I've heard that green hydrogen might be a solution for hard to decarbonize industries, but I don't know if there are any in San Diego. I'm pretty sure we don't have any steel mills or concrete factories. Is there a sense of anything that couldn't be electrified?
Interesting. Great, Kelly. Thank you for that question. I'll come to Murtaza with that question. What, to the extent the analysis that's been done so far in the report, the technical reports, Murtaza, did indicate anything that, you know, was identified as not something that could be decarbonized.
I'll just give the broad overview of what the study had. Is the 4 pathways, and that was land, energy, transportation, and buildings. So those were the 4 key chapters. However, with the whole emissions sector, the local policy opportunity analysis captures the entirety of the emissions for each city. So I'm going to defer to our experts on this from UC San Diego and USD to speak to this question.
Great. Let's see. Yeah, Gordon, go. Maybe we'll start with Gordon. Gordon, thoughts on?
Sure, and let me introduce myself first. So I'm Gordon McCord, Professor of Economics at the School of Global Policy and Strategy at UC San Diego. And first, just to thank everyone who's joining us tonight for all of this wonderful feedback and engagement. This is heartening and important. So just to that last question on the hard to decarbonize end uses in the region, a very quick answer is, of course, shipping, aviation to some extent, and then some very expensive retrofits in some commercial properties where you might explore some gaseous fuels instead of electrification. So that's just a quick answer on that. And I don't know, Andy, would it be helpful for me to just do a quick rundown on answers that have been in the chat over the last 10 minutes?
Yeah, if you've seen a few questions in the chat, you feel you can give some.
Yeah, let me just give some quick reactions, because I think we would all love to get more feedback from everyone who's in the virtual room.
Thank you.
So just to clarify a few things also. So first, just in the order that I managed to write them down, there were some questions early on plastics. And that made me think it's good for us to remind the audience what the scope of this work was. So we do not look at absolutely every source of emission in all of society. We focus on the biggest part of the problem, which is the energy system. So as others have mentioned, we do not look at waste. We do not look at embodied carbon. So if people rightly noting that making plastic is an emitting activity, we don't focus on that, but we do focus in the chapters, some of the chapters that Murtaza just described are the great bulk of greenhouse gas emissions in the system. It is not everything, but it is the great majority of the problem. And that's why we start there, which are the production and the consumption of energy and its use in the transportation, the buildings sectors. And then we looked in addition at the potential for natural climate solutions. And so again, it's not exhaustive, but it is the great majority of the problem. And I think that that's just important to note. In terms of greenhouse gas emissions from waste that folks are asking about. So in the state of California, that is about 2 to 3% of total emissions. So that's why we don't start there. Not to say that decarbonizing waste and doing a lot on waste is not important. Of course it is, but that's why we really start on the biggest chunk of the problem. Other questions have come in regarding the benefits of decarbonization. So just again, in terms of the philosophy of the project, we don't look at the benefits of decarbonization. We start on the premise that we all agree that we need to get to zero. And I think we're lucky to live in a region where there's broad consensus, where you've got a board of supervisors that's commissioned this work. So we're no longer trying to convince them of the public health benefits of decarbonization and things like that. We're actually looking now, let's assume for a second that we all agree that we need to decarbonize. What's the technically feasible way to do that? What's a least cost pathway? What are our options? What are the available proved technologies? And that's what we're trying to answer. So that's why you're not going to see too much on the different benefits of decarbonization to things like public health. Several questions on climate justice. I think for folks very rightly bringing that up. I think, and I hope you'll be pleased to see that equity is a focus throughout the report, including things like targeted investments to low-income and vulnerable communities in different parts of the chapters. You will see that. Of course, the just transition from the labor point of view, that there's an entire report in the workforce development efforts on that. So I think you'll be pleased to see that. Of course, we're open to feedback, but I think you'll be happy to see that equity is indeed a focus on the technical work throughout the entire RDF. Folks have asked about microgrids. They are indeed a part of the solution and a part of the mix. Distributed solar, rooftop solar, or urban infill, they're all in there. What we offer are lots of different possible mixes of the system. So you get some extreme where it's all utility scale solar. Then we show another path where it's really all mostly urban infill and distributed solar on rooftops. And we're showing the trade-offs that these all have different costs. And as a society, and we're going to have to decide what makes sense for us. That's the idea of the RDF. We're not providing one answer, we're providing multiple answers that will get us to zero. And we have some hard decisions and hard trade-offs to make as a society moving forward. And so, you know, folks are big proponents of rooftops. Fantastic, I agree, but it is true just from an engineering point of view that the cost structure is quite different from what utility scale solar can achieve. And we're going to have to trade off higher costs and higher rates with and lower land use footprints of this infrastructure with the inverse of that if we go the other way. And I think the answer at the end of the day, you know, who am I to guess, but it's likely to be a mix of both, and we're going to have to decide as a society what that mix is going to be.
All right. Thank you, Gordon. Why don't we pause there? Thank you so much for helping to be responsive to a lot of questions that have been coming in. Really appreciate that. I know the team behind the scenes is looking closely at all your comments and questions. And as Gordon just did a yeoman's job here of endeavoring to answer as much as we can here in the moment. So want to acknowledge him for that. Let's come to Bill Tippett. I see your Zoom hand raised. Bill, you should be able to unmute yourself now. And let us know what are your thoughts you want to share.
Okay, yeah, thanks. It's always good to see these public outreach events. It's helpful to educate us. My question is, this is the county's framework plan. And as you earlier noted, when you look at all of the climate action plans from all the 18 cities, they're woefully deficient. And in terms of even if you did everything that they say they're going to do, which they aren't, you'd still only be about halfway there. So what is the amount of buy-in? Which cities have agreed to follow the lead of this? And what does that mean in terms of commitments that they would be willing to make to their caps?
Thank you, Bill. Great question. And Murtaza, I'm going to ask Murtaza to come on and speak to that a little bit. But for everybody's benefit, just to kind of affirm, yes, the County of San Diego may be sponsoring development of this regional decarbonization framework, but it is intended to be, if you like, kind of a framework embraced by all jurisdictions in our county and our region. So, but with that, I'll let Murtaza speak a little bit more to what's the progress been so far on that sort of kind of regional collaboration and engagement of other jurisdictions.
So thanks for the question, Bill, because in the end, the proof of this framework is in the implementation. It is not legally binding, and we don't have authority for implementing it. Every jurisdiction would have to do their part. So what we want to do is create this idea bank with the best brains that we can, and with the science to show where the region needs to go, projected out over the mid-century period, and then have these conversations with jurisdictions about where we are and where we want to go collectively. Now, part of it is going to be reflected in individual caps, which includes the county's own caps for the unincorporated areas in terms of our commitments. But then some of it cannot be achieved through caps alone because the solutions are more regional in nature and have to be worked on collaboratively. So there is what Scott's study shows is the challenge that lies ahead of us, but it is not to rate or rank or to score our caps, but rather to show where the opportunity lies for further work. Where is the progress? We are in the beginning stages of this. We've started working regularly with all jurisdictions in the region. We're making presentations to different governments, and we will continue to reach out. This is the beginning of the process.
Thank you very much, Murtaza. I want to come to, I saw, let's see, I see Jessica Toth's Zoom hand up. Jessica, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Hi. If I understood correctly, you're not going to focus on solutions that are providing less significant amounts of greenhouse gas removal, such as the 23% of greenhouse gases that are coming from landfills. But I would suggest that in addition to looking at the sheer percentage contribution, looking at what it would take to implement solutions, and specifically with the organics out of landfill, the state is implementing mandates such that organics will need to be removed from landfills. And so much of the legwork is being done to get toward that solution. So I would love to see that remain on the table, even if it's one of the lower percentage contributors to greenhouse gases. Did that make sense?
Yes, it did, Jessica. Thank you. It was a point being that, as at least I understand it, reflecting briefly that, yeah, this is something that's in motion, and we can include this kind of in our framing of understanding all of the different initiatives and undertakings that are going to need to be taken to achieve what we want to achieve. So, so absolutely, I think that point well taken. I know others have mentioned in the chat that we do need to be aware of and not kind of lose sight of the impact of organics and waste landfill, those impacts, and how we're trying to make that change and how it will have the effect. And I want to also acknowledge a lot of commentary here about transportation, land use ideas and impacts. Some of you have been referencing other examples from other regions as well, which is always helpful to think about and hear about more specifically. Where these different examples that are emerging that we in our region can think about addressing more closely. So as well. And I also wanted to acknowledge too, I at least had a direct message asking more about what continued outreach will look like for this effort overall, and where's different ways we can do things like, as we noted, pop-up events. And we would love to hear from all of you, any and all of you, about where should we go out and about in our region to educate community members who perhaps don't typically, it's always hard to reach every corner of our community, I think you all know, but what can we do to really have a broader reach and connect with all corners of our county, either not just geographically, but different groups, cultures, organizations that are out there that are maybe not normally involved in a decarbonization conversation. So love to hear from you, but I also want to acknowledge, I see Ellie Igo. Ellie, you should be able to unmute and chat and tell us your thoughts, and then we'll move on to another question we have for all of you. Go ahead, Ellie.
When I did decarbonization strategy, it seemed that pre-state policy sort of the first step in being have a better out. It concerns me because in the now working lands, the really only existing policy about tree planting. And curious how limited you guys feel by that approach, and how you're thinking about overcoming it.
Ellie, we were, your first about 20 seconds were kind of broken up. Can you do a quick, go ahead and repeat? You should be able to unmute again. Go ahead and try. You're still muted. Sorry, Ellie, I think you're still unmuted.
Oh, okay, it's double muting me.
There you go.
Does that work?
Yeah, go ahead and say it again if you can.
I took off my headset. I'm so sorry for wasting
No
everyone's time. I'll see if I can be as brief as I was. So it seemed like in reviewing the document, it seemed like there was a limitation on reviewing existing policy. And especially in the natural working land section, because of that, there really was only a focus on tree planting. And so I'm curious how you guys, as you move forward, will address, sort of that gap in existing policy around other, areas where we need to get work done.
Excellent. Thank you, Ellie. And great to see someone able to participate from the outdoors. So that's pretty cool, right? Another wonders of our technology. So I'm gonna ask Murtaza to maybe start with Ellie, as best he can, give you some perspective to your question about, kind of those gaps as you noted. Murtaza, what are some thoughts you have for Ellie about that?
Yeah, our board recognized that there is some work that needs to be done with the agriculture community, particularly in terms of carbon farming. And if I may ask, if Elise is here to respond, so we're making a concerted effort to the agriculture community to hear from them, to understand what techniques they use so that we can incorporate it in future, in the future iteration. So if Elise is here, I'll pass it on to her.
Yeah, so some of the focus on tree planting came out of the CAP analyses, because, and Scott can speak more to this potentially, but really the only land use and natural climate solutions involved in the CAPs so far are about tree planting. So the CAPs are fairly limited, as you noted, but the natural climate solutions in land use considerations chapter has natural climate solutions beyond tree planting, and there is a section on agriculture specifically. So there is more information in the technical report for land use emissions and negative emissions. But you're absolutely right, the CAPs are fairly limited in that respect.
Thank you very much for that. And I see Susan Wayo. I apologize, Susan. You should be able to unmute yourself. Happy to hear from you. Go ahead. Susan, can you unmute yourself? There you go.
Okay. Hi, everyone.
Hi, we can hear you. Go ahead.
I'm Susan Wayo. I am a board member and also VP of Operations with the Center for Community Energy. We have currently have 2 grants from the county that are focused on getting gas, hot water heaters out of rental properties. When you mentioned the pop-up community events, I thought, that is what we're focusing on getting set up for, to have these pop-up events specifically aimed at this. My question is, how do I make sure that we are properly coordinating with the county, with your organization, with other organizations, so that we can get as many people coming to these events as possible? Because our biggest challenge, I think, in many ways, is getting people to understand, getting them educated and aware. Awareness is huge.
Right. Thank you very much, Susan. And I think by virtue of you just asking this question, you've already cued the RDF team here, Murtaza, Elise, and others, to think about when we're continuing to move forward with this engaging with you, Susan, and your organization and many others, because again, in the statement we all know and appreciate and understand together, not one of us as an organization or an entity can do it alone. It will take that broader collective effort. So we continue to appreciate, I see comments in the chat as well along those lines about, different ideas for who and with whom and how to connect with them. And we definitely want to encourage you to keep that coming. So thank you, Susan. More to come when it comes to outreach and engagement. Looking forward to partnering with you. And so what I want to introduce now is one more kind of poll. We're just going to do one more polling question and then have a little more follow-up with you, just to we want to make sure we're hearing from you, because some of you already talked about jobs, right? The workforce development. And so that's what you see here is really this all the characteristics of what's called the high road of a high road job, right? They're all important to the future of our workforce, right? In a decarbonized economy. So we all acknowledge that. But just curious, just for the sake of this poll question and kind of take your pulse here collectively as a group, which characteristic is most important to you? Which one is really kind of resonates with you and you feel is really, really critical? Again, we're not looking to remove any and just hone in on only 1 or 2, but just want to kind of take this group's pulse and hear from you on that. So we'll go ahead and open up the polling tool one more time. It should pop up here on screen for all of you. There we go. Yeah, we'd like to just kind of see which of these is resonating with you, most significantly. Again, they're all critical to what, the studies called those high road jobs, the importance of to the future of our workforce in a decarbonized economy. And in a couple minutes, we'll come to Sean Keone Ellis. Sean, I know this is important to you, so we'll unmute you in just a few minutes. So I see the responses coming in here. Keep them coming. Keep them coming. We'll take about 10 more seconds. So just over half of you have weighed in. Keep them coming. All right, let's go ahead and let's share the results. Over 2/3 of you weighed in. Let's take a look and see. So family supporting wages and benefits, number of you that was significant for you. Worker protections, of course. Standards of training, long-term pathways, absolutely. And in the chat, forgive me, I didn't note, but as you see, the last option we listed was other, hoping you'll tell us in the chat if you have other characteristics that you think are as critical that you want to make sure are elevated and part of this conversation. Good, so thank you. I see them coming in and why you selected these. Yeah, so not just the other characteristics, but if you made a choice from this selection we offered, why did these resonate with you? We'd love to hear more details from you about why you chose what you did. So, but let's come to Sean Keone. Sean, you should be able to unmute yourself. All right.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to make a comment when it comes to all the future projects that we're going to be building. It's incredibly essential that everybody from the labor movement, from the public to environmentalists to all walks of life, is to support project labor agreements and labor provisions as we're building these great new systems. And that's what I want to go to, is that these are new systems. From solar and wind. I mean, these are industries that are currently non-union, currently exploiting workers, and my brothers and sisters at the IBEW are doing an amazing job organizing those sections. And, as we go to taking care of waste and a circular economy and looking at hydrogen and biomass and all the other items that are going to come in the next decade as we solve this problem, it's incredibly essential that we do it right the first time, right? We don't want it to be another Amazon. We don't want it to be another Walmart. We don't want it to be one of those battles where it goes down in history, where a new industry moved so quickly, we were unable to ensure worker protections for all communities, for all people in this region. So just wanted to make a comment. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Sean. I appreciate that. So I know you've been a regular and consistent participant here in this process. And yeah, thank you for continuing to offer that perspective, and for all of you, of course. And seeing the comments in the chat, and for example, asking why there was no all of the above choice. And by the way, it is all of the above. Again, that's part of what these characteristics are about. It's not about leaving any behind or choosing a few of these. All of these characteristics are going to be important to our future workforce as it relates to a decarbonized economy. So appreciate you still bringing in more thoughts and comments and reflections on those as well. So again, team is here and happy to try and further answer any specific questions you might have about what's been done so far, or what may be coming ahead as part of the RDF. And before we wrap up tonight, I'll let you know we will again reflect on what are our next steps. We have a lot of outreach and engagement coming down the way here, and we'll want to make sure we put that back in front of you so you can capture that information and be aware of the next time when we want to hear from you again and connect with you. So the good news is we have a lot of opportunities coming forward. So good. So again, anybody who'd like to share more thoughts about this question in particular we have on screen, but anything else you wanted to offer, again, the high road jobs concept and workforce development. And again, for any of you who had additional thoughts about, I'm seeing things such as capital investments, for example, contributing as well. So, question about what long-term, pathways can look like. How do we construct those? I'm seeing comments and reflections like that. So thank you. Yeah, and acknowledging none of this is suggested to be easy. We do want to acknowledge that as well and just kind of paint a rosy picture. These will involve challenging, tough choices, trade-offs, as many of you have already identified and referenced, and I know the reporting, endeavors to do that as well. So Sonia, please, yeah, we'd love to hear from you again. What are your thoughts? I know you made some reference earlier about jobs, and yeah, please.
Yeah. So I just have a quick question about the public outreach plan that was provided, where there was 6 different forms of public outreach, and I was just curious, like the sector workshops, there was another one that might have been like more specific, and I don't know if that was the one. My question is, are all of these public outreach available for the entire public, or will they be more specified only for certain target audiences based on whether their education background, work in this field?
First of all, absolutely. They're all available to the public. The staff will come in a moment to correct anything here, but foundationally, yes, open to all the public. That said, they're each designed to be a little bit more focused on different audiences than others, if you will. So for example, here tonight, this is a community meeting, right, that we're at tonight, March 24, intended to reach the broadest range of community members we can overall, to come in and learn and just understand where we are today and hear, the discussion and comments we've been having tonight, right? The sector workshops are intended to be a little bit more specific, diving deeper on each of these sectors, right? Energy, transportation, buildings, land use. And we'll have even deeper dives, if you will, on the technical data that's kind of been emerging with the experts, some of the experts you see here. Those are, we anticipate those to be even more technical in nature. Your average community member might feel a little lost in some of that, frankly. So we want to make sure these community meetings, the speaker series, the pop-up community events, we're going to do everything we can to make sure all this information is accessible and meaningful for the breadth of community members. But the speaker series as well, we want to take that as an opportunity. We heard the first presenter, Elena Crete, right? Kind of bringing in that outside, broader international, national view. We'd like more speakers like Elena and like others who can tell us what else is happening, what's happening in some of these other regions. Where are they making progress? Where have they learned? That, again, intended for everyone, of course. The direct engagement that Mirza mentioned, that Elise mentioned, one-on-one meetings, particularly with the other jurisdictions, right? To really talk about what collaboration can and should look like. The pop-up community events we talked about. Susan mentioned wanting to support, Sonia, hopefully you can be part of that as well. And of course, the regional convenings for implementation with public officials, again, public facing as well, public access, absolutely. So anyway, sorry, that was my quick run through, and hopefully for everybody's benefit as well. Sonia, any reflection on that or further questions?
No, that's good. And I guess the sector workshops, you guys will let us know, like which city is going to be on what topic.
But yeah, Mirza, please,
Mirza. Sonia, and there are many, thank you for many of you have continued participation. We did do some focus groups last fall,
yeah,
and they're somewhat similar but different. And I want to the difference here is that these sector workshops are not by invitation only, they're open, but nonetheless they have enough in terms of subject matter expertise that people with detailed technical knowledge should participate in them. And we do have the dates locked in for April 7th. It's going to be energy. So we will have energy experts to go deep dive into policy discussion. On April 14th, we will have land and agriculture. We can focus on those specific policy details. On April 21st, it's transportation. On April 28th, it's building. And I know there was a very robust discussion around building. So April 28th is at the end of the month. We hope you can, you will register. We don't have a link yet, but nonetheless, we will be sending out an announcement and asking you to respond for the link. And then May 5th is the jobs.
Okay.
And
thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
And,
thank you.
and
my only other thought is I'm thinking, and I'm being presumptuous here, that I'm considering that the bipartisan infrastructure bill, that this regional decarbonization framework will probably get a lot of funding for that. Or is that being too presumptuous on that?
Not at all. That's a great suggestion for the regional collaboration to occur. Some of it will need some kind of an external incentive, and this bill and any others from the state and federal level could be the cause for people to get together and have these kind of big picture discussions. And with that, I kind of slightly want to also post there that the recommendations from the consultants in the studies are not recommendations of the county and not being adopted by the board, nor are we suggesting they be adopted. But nonetheless, when we bring these ideas together, there might be programs, for example, application for funds that cannot be done by one jurisdiction alone. So therefore, the implementation is going to be a continuous process.
Thank you, Mirza. Thank you, Van. Sonia, thank you for the question. Appreciate it. And it's a good opportunity to, I was going to cover these next steps more before we wrapped up, but it was a great opportunity to bring it forward now. So good. I see Bob Leiter as well. Bob, you should be able to unmute yourself. Bob, good to see you. It's been a little while. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. This is very, very interesting. One of the things I noted, though, tonight is that there really aren't any representatives from any of the regional or local planning agencies and local governments that this framework was going to be relying on for implementation and for policy adoption and development. And it seems to me that when you're going to be talking in these next meetings about energy and transportation and building and jobs, it would be really important to have staff members from the local governments like the city of San Diego and the city of Chula Vista and regional agencies in areas like SANDAG for transportation planning. And there are a broad number of regional and local government agencies that have been working on these same issues now for about 20 years. And it just seems to me that the dialogue would be more useful and perhaps the ideas would be more well-formed if you were to invite staff representatives from all those agencies to those upcoming meetings so they can provide their perspectives on some of the big ideas that have been presented in your report up to this point.
Absolutely, Bob. And that level of collaboration, coordination directly with these agencies, just the folks you've mentioned, has been initiated, is beginning to happen from this county project team along directly with them. And I did want to reference again, these direct engagement meetings and presentations are ongoing. They'll be happening through the summer. So that's more of the, the collaboration directly with the other subject matter experts, planning, energy experts that you've mentioned in the jurisdictions. One-on-one small scale, but also at larger scale in terms of collaborative and really bringing all those experts together. So absolutely, Bob, we're going to continue to invite them to venues like this, more community-wide meetings, but also know that these other opportunities and activities that have been identified here are intended for them as well. And there's a lot of that direct collaboration and coordination among them is going to continue to happen. So thank you, Bob. Yeah.
And I would just say, I think it would be really useful if you could invite some of them to attend these upcoming meetings in April, since you're really looking for public input, and it would be good to be able to ask those questions directly to the agencies that you're looking to help you implement these big ideas.
Very good. Thank you very much, Bob. We will definitely invite them and ask them to kind of support the project team here and helping answer questions about what is and or is not happening when it comes at the policy level and analysis levels here across our county. Thank you, Bob. Appreciate the thoughts and questions there. And wanted to also, again, acknowledge in the chat a lot of further comments and questions here and in support of comments Bob just made and Sonia's points too, questions about how we're going to continue to engage and reach everyone, particularly at the technical levels, others who are contributing to this work in terms of identifying solutions, potential policy updates and changes within individual jurisdictions at a regional scale. By all means, your RDF team here hears that loud and clear and continues to do the work of building those connections with them. So thank you, all of you, for supporting that, the importance of that. So as you can kind of see on screen here, definitely want to hear any other additional comments or questions that we haven't covered tonight. The team's here to try and answer anything they can with the information they have so far. But again, hearing from you about your reflections on where we are so far with the RDF and where we're going. So Steve Gelb, I see you here on screen and with your hand. Go ahead, you should be able to unmute. And yeah, Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I really love the RDF. I love the fact that it begins by pointing out that all of the government plans so far, even if they were adapted and implemented as they're written, would still fall far short of what we need to do. And I'm thinking about the huge battle that was necessary to get the regional transportation plan passed in December. The fact that the RDF says that the regional transportation plan is a good start, but it doesn't go nearly far enough.
Mhm.
So the RDF correctly says that we need to spend a great deal of money and make dramatic changes in how we're living. And that's why I love the RDF. But my fear is, what plans do we have to motivate the populace and motivate the elected officials to move forward with this plan, given the opposition we've seen for much less dramatic, for plans that ask for much less. So that's my question.
Great. All right, thank you. Thank you for that comment. We appreciate hearing that. Good. Others too. Again, I know some people have had to sign off, and appreciate you. Again, I want to thank all of you just for making the time tonight. We know that Zoom can be helpful, right? And us not having to travel to an in-person meeting, although those have great benefits too. But still, we know you've dedicated time to be here tonight. We really appreciate you doing that. This has been really helpful, and it's been a really strong turnout. So thank you for that. Any additional questions? But all that said, we also want to respect your time. We scheduled to go as late as 8 as needed as the comments and questions keep coming in, but also want to acknowledge too that we're also available to, if we'd be able to hear and receive all comments so far, we're able to wrap up a little early as well. So let me just kind of suggest this kind of a last call for any comments or questions you'd like to add into the mix here with our time tonight. Please, again, in the Zoom chat specifically, if you have I apologize, Steve, let me unmute you again. Steve Gelb, can you unmute yourself again?
Yeah, thanks.
Did you ask a point of question? I apologize, maybe I missed that.
Yeah, I thought I asked a question. My question was, what are the plans to deal with the opposition? What are the plans to generate the sense of urgency that is going to be necessary to carry out all of the wonderful ideas that are in the RDF?
Thank you, Steve. I apologize. I may have heard that as a little more rhetorical on your part as opposed to a direct question, so thank you. So Steve's question, I'll look to Murtaza here. Maybe he can provide some insight about, how this will be brought forward and, advocated essentially, with the broader community. I know that these next steps as part of the RDF will be about continued community education and engagement and involvement overall. So, but Murtaza, any kind of further thought on, our broader next steps and how people will be engaged, and if there's opposition, how that might be responded to?
Thank you, Steve, for your question. Appreciation of the framework. I think that you are on the mark on this. Without actual momentum to implement, there will not be actual results. The solution is not like a plan per se, but really engagement and momentum for all the actors in the region, including business, labor, community, investors, environmental advocates, elected officials, regional agencies, cities, tribes. So the extent of outreach here is ambitious for this. For just the 3 months that we have in front of us, we're not just planning to call agencies, but we're going to agencies. We're having monthly check-in presentations to city staff. Will we present to electeds? But the bigger picture is those voices that have not been a part of this process. They're either overlooked or generally do not have the ability to participate in big picture climate change discussions. So we really have work to do, and we would like participation more, and we would encourage any ideas and suggestions to reach those kind of underserved communities. Underserved is not just about underserved in infrastructure, but underserved politically in terms of their engagement in the justice discussions. So there's a lot of room to cover. I'll just give a slight correction to the dates I read. There is an event we're planning in April that'll be Spanish only, and Gordon has graciously agreed to provide the entire presentation in Spanish. We need to reach out to those communities that would not traditionally engage. And whilst I'm on this translation, I just want to ask if there are people that need translation. We do these bilingually, English, Spanish for all of them. But if there are any other languages, we ask that you let us know 3 days in advance so we can get a translator for any other language.
Right.
So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Andy.
Thank you very much. Yeah, to emphasize Murtaza's point, in addition to having Frida here tonight helping with our Spanish translation, the county is prepared and ready to respond to additional languages as needed for upcoming meetings and event opportunities. If there's an opportunity you can see to go directly to a group at their space, in their meeting space, that would need some, other languages, again, county is happy to help make that work with you and or that organization. So just thanks in advance to any and all of you who have specific suggestions for that. So happy to receive that in the chat here, but also through the, I believe the best email is the Murtaza, you and team can correct me, it's zerocarbon@sdcounty.ca.gov. And so we're again gonna place links into the chat, the Zoom chat here, to send you to the Engage platform, the engagement platform that the RDF team has set up. And again, that's going to be a great space for you to be able to stay in touch, but also continue to provide input and insight and ideas overall. So again, as noted here, we do, hopefully you're taking some notes here on your end of these upcoming dates that are coming up. Again, many things happening in parallel. So, are these community meetings just like tonight here, March 24, roughly 1 per month. And you see those coming out in April, May, June, and July on those dates that you can see on screen. That's April 19, May 17, June 28, and July 26. And there is now the link in the chat. If you can dive in, you can head to the website to learn more and make sure you're signed up for email updates. But the sector workshops also, again, that we talked about earlier, but again, kind of deeper dive with subject matter experts on each of the 4, each meeting dedicated to one of the sectors: energy, building, transportation, land use. And you see those dates there and jobs on May 5. So again, please do visit the website, stay in touch. They'll be constantly updating with information, Zoom links, date certain, time specific, more emails to come as well. And as noted, the speaker series, hopefully you get to participate and learn from the range of folks we'll be bringing forward overall. Again, pop-up community events, please do send notes to the RDF team about suggested events, locations where you feel like the process can reach folks who are not normally engaged in these conversations. We appreciate your ideas and thoughts. And definitely stay tuned as well for these broader regional convenings for implementation. Again, as has been brought up by at least a few of you tonight, making sure that community, if not policymakers, executive staff that are helping to inform decisions are really convening and having these conversations together like we've had tonight. So that process continues to be ongoing. Yeah, so the zerocarbon@sdcounty.ca.gov does go to the RDF project team. So we encourage you to email to their one simple email address. The folks you've met or know here tonight, Murtaza, Elise, others from the county staff, all can receive that and make sure that they're coordinating the responses for you. So good. So with that represents our next steps. And I'm going to ask you now for any last questions, comments that you wanted to offer here before we do a sign off and let you get back to your evening. It's always nice to end a meeting a little early if you can, right? Especially as we're approaching the 8 o'clock hour. So, but just want to thank you all again for all your time, your contributions here. your thoughts and ideas, your challenging questions, right, about what is or is not being studied or done or analyzed. Please do continue to offer those, and this team will continue to answer them as best they can and take those ideas back for further consideration and exploration and development. So good, so very good. So please just stay in touch, visit those links in the chat. And I think with that, on behalf of the entire team, I want to thank Mirza Baksamusa, Elise Hansen, joined by Michael De La Rosa, and additional team members I may have missed, but Scott Andrews is here again. You heard from Gordon McCord as well. Elena Crete, also here from the very beginning today. I want to appreciate her time too and contributions as well. There are additional county staff who are here. I want to thank my colleagues who are here as well. Joey and Jackie in the behind the scenes. They've been taking very detailed notes on a digital whiteboard. I apologize, I didn't take the opportunity to share that with you, but they are capturing that in addition to what we have in the chat, in addition to what we have on the Zoom recording. So we've got a lot of good redundancy here to have captured all your inputs and ideas. So, so thank you. We'll go ahead and say our final thank you, and we will turn off the Zoom in about 30 seconds or so. So with that, have a good night. We hope to see you at these upcoming events, and have a good evening. Good night, everybody.